reality.
Please give a huge welcome to Peter Davison. We're separated because of the projector.
Was that right? Okay.
Yeah. Welcome, Peter.
I don't think I can follow that.
Well, welcome to Eastleigh.
Thank you very much.
It's Doctor Who's taken you all around the world, and now, of course, the very zenith of all your trips.
Eastleigh.
Eastleigh, yes, Southampton.
Absolutely. I moved quite quickly on those trips, didn't I?
You certainly did.
That's one advantage I had. I moved quicker than my predecessors.
Yeah. And in actual fact, you were very young when you took the role, weren't you? You were kind of like my age. Oh, I know you to laugh quite
Retirement.
Yeah, I mean, it was presumably quite a big decision to make, wasn't it?
It wasn't. I was 29 when I was offered the part, and I was doing quite well at the time, and that was the biggest question in my head, because
With all creatures in
I've
particular.
done all creatures. I've done a couple of. I was doing a couple of sitcoms, and I didn't know if doing Doctor Who would keep me away from doing other jobs that might come up. That was my biggest fear. And I was looking at Tom, who'd done it for 7 years, and he was so identified with Doctor Who that I thought it's going to be difficult for him in the future, and I think it was difficult for a few years. So I was in two minds about whether to do it simply because of that. On the other hand, it was Doctor Who, and I'd watched it since I was 12 years old, and how do you turn down a part like that? It's something you've grown up with, and suddenly, I was, as an actor, I would think, I'd like to get a part in Doctor Who one day, and then one day someone rings and says, how would you like to be the Doctor?
Would you like the part?
Yes, so I suppose, it's a bit like in The Godfather, I was made an offer I couldn't refuse, and so, as I've said before, John Nathan Turner took me out for lunch. And I had I had a big list of questions I was going to ask him about, what it would mean and how much time would I have off to do other things. And he got me drunk, and I said yes before we got to dessert.
Well, we're very grateful for that lunch.
Yeah.
That's all I can say. And I asked the same question to Wendy and Fraser a little earlier. Did you know what you were taking on in terms of all of this? Because did you think, for example, All Creatures was going to follow you around for your entire career? Oh, it's Tristan.
I mean, it was following me around, and it did follow me around more than Doctor Who, actually, which wasn't a bad thing, but no, of course, I did not think that I would be here in 2025 in Eastleigh. No, because you think when you leave a part. I set myself 3 years when I took the job, and when I left at the end of the 3 years, I thought, well, there'll be another doctor now, whoever that bloke was, I will soon be forgotten. But then, first of all, there were conventions that one did, and there was quite clearly a big fan base. Then there was Big Finish came along and kept the show alive, and then of course the program came back itself. So no one could have dreamt, that.
And it's never quite left you, has it? You're still working with the Big Finishes, which are great, by the way.
No, because there's no reason for it to. I mean, I was fortunate because I left Doctor Who, and then I got a job in a completely different thing, a BBC Two classic serial. So I never had any reason to distance myself from it. I think the reason that Tom felt that, the reason that he didn't do the 5 Doctors, for example, was because he just felt he needed time away from Doctor Who to get his own kind of character and career back.
And I suppose with Tom, he probably wouldn't be as acceptant of not being the lead.
No, I think I think there was, when we did the 5 Doctors, originally Tom, of course, was meant to be in it. they always thought there would be a problem between John Pertwee and Tom Baker, both of whom felt they were the Doctor. I don't think Patrick or I felt that way in quite the same way. We're not possessive about it in the way that John and Tom were. But I think John certainly, when he came into the Five Doctors, I think was prepared to have a battle. In fact, Patrick, who had most of the scenes with John Pertwee, kind of just charmed him out of that very quickly. So he became, just one of the rest of us. So that was great. Yeah, you're right. I don't think Tom would probably be. We've done it for 7 years. There were people when I went to America to a convention. There were people there who had no other Doctor. No other Doctor had been shown.
Like me, there's a kind of sweet spot with ages.
There's a sweet spot with age, yes, but
Yeah.
at least the other Doctors had been on.
Yeah.
In some places in America, Tom Baker had been the only Doctor that could sing, so because they hadn't shown the earlier black and white or John Pertwee shows. So yeah, it was.
Because Alex, when he introduced the thing earlier, he was saying about everybody has their doctor, and I know when I get those forms and you have to fill in the medical information and they say put down the name of your doctor, and I always go, it really is Peter. You find that, so there's a whole load of people my age, like early 30s, who sort of grown up with you, which is just a wonderful thing. Do you feel, have you seen that progress over the years? Where they were sort of teenagers when you were on it.
I'm very aware that depending on what age you are, and I'm not questioning what
53.
age you are, you are your doctor is defined by the age in which you first
Same as
watched it.
Roger Moore is my Bond. It's
Yeah,
the
there
same
are
thing.
far too many people who walk around these things with long scarves on.
As opposed to some decorative vegetable.
A decorative vegetable, far better. Not quite as warm, but anyway. So yeah, that's absolutely fine. I'm always gratified when we get, young people who have somehow found the inclination and time to go back and watch the classic Doctors, and actually be that forgiving about the quality of the sets and the special effects in those days, which were not particularly great. But I find younger people actually more forgiving about that than maybe older people.
And I don't necessarily think there's a correlation between budget and quality. I find some of the most enjoyable things I've watched have been the cheapest chips, really.
No, you're right. No, and there isn't any difference in terms of the narrative and the stories. But obviously, we were making it with a tiny budget and in a very compressed amount of time.
Yeah.
So we were always being pushed by that clock ticking around to 10 o'clock.
Yeah, 10 o'clock.
When they would turn all the lights off.
In fact, we've got a little clip here. In fact, your first appearance in
Right.
We can just play this now. What's interesting, this video is time coded and it's got the time of day, and we can look at the rush. This is when Tom regenerates into you.
Right.
But look at the time, and you're whisked off. So this is 9:30.
Yeah.
And 10 o'clock is the deadline, isn't it?
10 o'clock, yeah.
Did you do it for present?
Yes. I'm a bit higher, Tom. So I want to just look over your chest, really.
Do you remember this day?
Oh,
I didn't know anything about a beacon.
No.
I thought I was just reaching out for it. I don't like a beacon. Does he insist on a beacon?
No, I just wanted to see what it looked like.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Thank God.
Temple is understand your mind.
Thankfully, there is no Becca.
Okay, Tom out, Adrian in.
So,
1:45.
yeah, so we've got 14 minutes
Peter
to go.
Kiss up to the hand. Head on deck.
How conscious were you all of the 10 o'clock deadline?
Oh, very, very rare, yes.
That's smashing. Hold that. Nobody move.
No,
Eyes open or closed? Yes, open.
all right.
No, we've actually run over here.
Oh gosh, sure we have, yeah. It must have been Tom's last They? That's the only reason they were going around.
Because weren't they that brutal then that they're like, they actually...
Yeah, it was quite, it was a union thing, you know, so it would either be the lighting department or it would be the VT operators, depending on who was being most militant at the time. And they would simply turn off the lights. They just get to 10 o'clock.
Even if you had
Even if you were
30 seconds
halfway
to go.
through a tape, they would just turn the lights on or they'd turn the tapes off.
Wow. Having seen how technology has progressed, how has television production progressed? Do you think it was kind of better at Television Centre than it is now? Because it's such a huge enterprise now. When you look at the names at the end of the episodes, they have to do them in such a small font and they whiz up the screen because there's hundreds of people involved, whereas it was a much smaller team.
It was a much smaller team. I'm not sure if that's why they do it so quickly. I think it's just to gain a few extra seconds on the length of the show. I don't know. Because BBC, an ITV hour in drama is now, I think, 42 or 43 minutes.
Yeah.
So that's 20 minutes of other stuff, commercials, or at the end of the show, trailers for the next thing coming up. As you said, you know, the budget is no indication of quality, and I think sometimes people get a bit too clever with what they can do now. The shots you can do. There's a thing that happened after I did Doctor Who, because of advances in technology. When they make a mistake, for example, in All Creatures Great and Small, they do a shot and they suddenly realise that there was a television aerial that was completely of the wrong era on top of a house, and then we'd have to go back and reshoot a shot. Now the cry goes up, we'll fix it in post.
Yeah.
That's what they say. Post-production, they can fix absolutely anything. Now we go in, when you do a show, and you're contracted for it, there's always one ADR session, which is where you dub your voice onto lines that weren't clear enough, or there was an aeroplane going over. So there's all sorts of shortcuts that you can do now that you couldn't. You know, we would film on 16mm film, but outdoors now it's all on digital cameras.
Yeah. Although happy days in that respect, because if they've still got the film, you're now in HD on a lot of the Blu-rays because they've kept the film.
They can update. They can
rescan it.
But they can only do that for the film. They
Yeah.
can't do that for obviously the television studio. So there's all sorts of magical things they can do. Whether it improves the program, because I can sit and watch some of these. Maybe this is my age. You know, some of the retro programs they have on these streaming channels, and go, this is really good.
Yeah.
And now there's, before I remember, the was it called The Killing, the Norwegian, the Swedish detective show, I think it was called The Killing, wasn't it? And then it was followed by Broadchurch, which did the same thing. So prior to that, there was the obsessive thing, got to move the story on, got to have a murder before the titles, if it's a crime story. Everything's got to happen really quickly. And then the Swedish shows came out, which were really slow. Rather than a murder story in 45 minutes, you had a murder story over 6 episodes. So everything then slowed down again. So it just depends on people's taste at the time. But I think sometimes, although these advances in technology can be great for the speed at which you can do things, nothing really replaces a good script. There are great things being written now as well, also made now, but that's the primary thing, it's not just...
And what about the kind of family feel that Television Centre would have had? Because it was a television factory, wasn't it, with staff of all departments, and you would get someone who would be on Juliet Bravo one week as a crew, and then they'd be with you the next week. I love Juliet Bravo, that's when I joined the police actually. And it was a kind of melting pot of all these amazing people.
Yeah.
And that kind of has gone now, hasn't it?
Yes, I'm not sure if that, although it was great to be a part of that family, I'm not sure how much that contributed to the viewer experience, but certainly, you know, you go into Television Centre in the morning and there'd be a big list, and it would just show how many shows were out filming that day, how many shows were in the studios that day, and then you'd always see people. So you got quite friendly with lots of people who you never worked with.
And do you think that helped with castings for either your show or other programmes? How I work with them in this? Or
Yeah, I mean, I think my career was moved on on several occasions by eating lunch in the BBC canteen. Because they would go up there and they'd go, okay, we've got this series coming up. Who the heck are we going to cast in this? Oh, well, that's that bloke from All Creatures Great and Small sitting over there. And then suddenly you get a call, and they would think of you. So the fact that you're in vision, so the more you work, the more advantages you had, which is terribly unfair, but that was just the way it worked.
If it worked for you.
Yeah,
Then.
I mean, I must have annoyed, because I went from job to job to job for the first few years, I can only think back now and think how many young actors I must have annoyed. Because it sort of annoys me now when I see actors just doing, you know, over and over again. Oh, it's him again. Well, that was me.
Yeah.
So I think I did, as I say, I think I annoyed probably a lot of people. But you don't think of that when you're doing it. You just think,
You're just grateful
wow,
for
I've
the
got
work.
another job.
Yeah, I mean, in a previous occasion, when I interviewed you, I was going to print out the list of your programmes, but I thought, oh, I haven't really got enough paper. You have been blessed, and quite rightly too, because you're great at what you do. But Doctor Who really does follow you around, and all your compatriots as well,
Yes.
doesn't it? Unlike anything else. Why do you think?
Do they
do All Creatures Great and Small?
No,
And
indeed,
conventions.
if we had an All Creatures Great and Small convention tomorrow, nobody would turn up. And yet, no, it's serious, but yeah, it's great enough. I've had several people come up to me today, while having doing a photograph. They're saying, actually, I really love you in All Creatures Great and Small more than anything else. But there's something about sci-fi, and I don't know what it is, that just draws people in and makes them huge fans of a series, and they watch the same episodes over again, and they want to come and meet the people who are in those shows. I don't know what it is.
You're missing a trip. Perhaps you should arrange one and just see how it goes. But then there's Doctor Who has all the merchandise as well, doesn't it? It's all. I mean, you think how many products your face has been on?
Yeah, but I think the merchandise is a byproduct of the fandom rather than encouraging. I suppose it encourages people to collect things, but I think the essential thing, it's something about the genre, about science fiction, extending into sort of fantasy programs as well, that just creates this fan base. People love it.
Now, Peter, there's something I would like to ask you, and this is a family-related question. Namely, that your son-in-law is... Yes. Now, be honest with me, is there a little bit of doctor rivalry there? It must be very bizarre, socially, when, you had your moment, and now he's had his moment, and then again, and then again.
You mean from my point of view?
Yes,
of course there is. So I think the funniest thing was, he's a huge fan, David, so I'll forgive him anything about Doctor Who. It's quite surprised me that he did it in the first place.
Yeah. Well,
because
he's my age, so you would have been his doctor like you were mine.
I was his doctor, yes.
Yes.
Well, we did Time Crash, basically, about that. But the thing is that his career was going really well when Christopher Eccleston left Doctor Who, and they were left without a doctor. And so I remember when I heard the rumour, they were offering it to David Tennant. I thought, well, he's not going to do that, is he? Because he's doing really well. But once again, it was an irresistible offer that they made to him. It was Doctor Who. So he did it. And that was great. I thought he was a terrific doctor. And then he left, moved on, did all sorts of other things. And then I'm sitting in his kitchen one day. And I said, so, David, I've heard this rumour that you're going back to Doctor Who. And then he has to swear me to secrecy. And he says, yes. And I said, so are you the 10th Doctor? Or are you the 14th Doctor? And he was very, very sure in his assertion, no, I'm the 14th as well. So it's 2-1 up to David Tennant.
Well, Peter, there's still time.
That's true.
Yeah. I mean, if there was the opportunity to come back, not necessarily in the lead for a whole, would you come back as a guest?
Of course I would.
Because you came back for Jodie, didn't you?
Yeah, you know, I enjoy everything about it. It's just that, you know, they rarely think of it. They did in Jodie's. But yeah, of course, we're all there. Well, they're doing big finishes, you know.
Yeah.
It's been a major part of my life. It's not been my whole life, but it's been a major part of it. So why would I reject it? You know, I was lucky enough to do in the 50th anniversary, we did the Five-ish Doctors reboot, because I remember thinking when the 50th anniversary was coming up and everyone was talking about it, who was going to be in it?
Did you?
I kind of wanted to be in it, but of course I kind of knew I wouldn't be, because it was a long time ago and we all looked much older.
But I think, who here would have loved it in the 50th if Peter, Colin, Sylvester, So I do think they you know, and we would have got, it doesn't matter, they don't look quite the same.
Yeah, no, and I'm sure that's true.
Yeah.
At the same time, the fun I had writing that Five-ish Doctors reboot, because it was about everything to do with, you know, our frustration about not being in it, and yet then we did end up in it.
Yes.
And would our parts have been, I think Colin, Sylvester and I sat around one day and thought, you know, it would have been nice to have been in the 50th, but had we been in the 50th, we'd have each had one line, you know, and that would have been it. Whereas this way, we had a whole half-hour story, which was kind of quite funny and yet, you know, very affectionate about Doctor Who. So I have no intention of turning my back on it if I'm asked. But if I'm not asked, I'll make a spoof about it.
Sounds fair. But when you did come back for Jodie, though, didn't you? For her last story.
Yeah.
What was the secrecy like in that? Because there were so many people in Cardiff, aren't there, with phones and that sort of thing. How did you get away with it?
I don't know. I wasn't really a party to that because I couldn't do it when Colin and Paul and Sylvester did it. I was working on something else. So they went down. Actually, it's an alarming failure on the part of journalists, I think, because apparently there was a photograph of Sylvester and Colin and whoever in the foyer of the hotel in Cardiff, and nobody thought to put two and two together. They just didn't get it. They thought, wonder what they're down for. Let's move on. And, but then I came down later, because I had to come down and do the bit separately with Janet, who very kindly came down. I'll have to say that very kindly, otherwise she'll shout at me. So I was not part of the secrecy. I don't recall ever being told not to say anything, although I think it was a given that you wouldn't. But how the press missed, you know, the fact that Colin, Sylvester and Paul Gower were down, I don't know. I've no idea.
Oh, well, he got away with it, which was good. Does anyone have any questions for Peter? I'm sure there are going to be loads, rather than hearing me witter on. Let's go right to the very front.
Like, how was it like to be the Doctor when you first, like, was going to be in it?
How was it? What's it like?
Yeah, how was it like? How was it like being like being Doctor?
It was brilliant because you know you're basically saving the universe every week. Well, who wouldn't want to do that? But also, you become this instantly recognised. You, along with the TARDIS becomes this instantly recognisable thing. So you know, we would go filming. I was telling someone this morning. We go filming a little village in Berkshire, I think, and we would put the TARDIS down because it of the storyline, and suddenly people would come out of their houses and just stand around and wonder. And then I turn up in my costume
days as well.
Yeah, and you just think, wow, this is just extraordinary. It was such an iconic thing, and then me in my costume, my stick of celery and lapel, my decorative vegetable, and people would just go, wow. You know, and that applies to all the.
It must be good for your ego as well, mustn't it? If you're having a bit of a bad day, it must be good for your ego.
Oh, this today is very
Yes.
good for one's ego.
Yes.
That's why someone said you enjoy these things.
Yes.
And I said, well, who wouldn't enjoy it? You come along and people go, oh, I loved you in this, I loved you in that. Of course it's good, yeah. It's brilliant.
Unless they go,
So-
you're my 9th favourite Doctor.
Have I had a smart down as 9? I think I've had 4th favourite Doctor.
I've got a question for you about autographs, actually.
Yeah.
I know a lot of you now put your doctor number in Roman
Yes.
numerals. Who started that?
You know, I
You
don't-
never used it.
Don't really know
No.
who started it.
Does anyone know? It's a good thing.
Yeah.
I think that-
Well, in that case, in the absence of anyone else knowing, I might just claim that I did it.
Say it. Question, yes, you have one.
Yeah, so playing the part of the Doctor must be quite nerve-wracking at some point because there's people before you who've done it, but that characteristic and that quirkiness of the Doctor's always gone through all the previous sort of Doctors. For yourself, you took that on brilliantly, but then you sort of made it in your own. How much of that was you naturally being you and putting that character together, or how much of it was actually you've been directed, you must play it like this?
No one said that to me at all. So you're really left on your own. And when Doctor Who has been cast, it's usual they cast you to be different. So no one cast me to be like Tom Baker. You know, no one cast Tom Baker to be like John Pertwee. So you're just left on your own. And as an actor, normally what you would do in those circumstances is you'd read the script and you'd go, this character comes from this background and he probably thinks this way, he's this type of man. With Doctor Who, you're dealing with in my case, as I was described, as being a 750-year-old Time Lord from the planet Gallifrey. There is no research you can do on that. So it sounds so blasé to say this now, I just started with basics. I was younger and I could move quicker. I could run down corridors faster than the previous Doctors, which is what I did. I loved, there's no offence to John Pertwee or Tom Baker, but I loved the first 2 Doctors because they were who I watched. So I tried to take elements from both of those Doctors. So there was a slightly irascible quality that William Hartnell had, and a vulnerable quality that Patrick Troughton had, which were my 2 main things. I thought, I watched a couple of Tom Baker stories, and I thought they were great. You know, they were, I think, script edited by Douglas Adams. So they were they were witty and they were funny, and the humour was more just ran through the entire episode. But the problem with that is I felt it kind of took away from the drama a bit. So if I wanted to do anything, I wanted to make the dangerous parts more dangerous and more worrying. And I would have liked to kept more jokes in, but John Nathan Turner, our producer, didn't like jokes, which I think was part of the problem between him and Tom. So they fell out over that. But I do quite like jokes, but we struggle to put just little funny things in. But yeah, no, you're given no help at all. You just have to go away and come up with something.
Okay, another question.
This is Doctor related. Now, as the man responsible for Officer McCurk and Button Moon, with Doctor Who, do you want to write the theme tune and sing the theme tune?
So Doctor Who, do you think I should rewrite the? I could do the end credits song. How did you even know about Officer McCurk?
Very old.
I think you need to explain what that is.
It's a song I wrote, which was actually recorded by Dave Clark 5. And it's a comedy song. And in the old days when we used to do conventions, in America they'd have this mad thing, cabaret night on a Saturday night. All the guests had to come up and get up and do a little bit, a turn. So I decided to sing this song, Officer McCurk, which I'd written a few years before. And the audience would join in the chorus, and I think it was quite a funny song. Anyway, Dave Clark recorded it, and bless him, managed to make it not funny at all. Anyway, only because it's without an audience. You can have a fake audience, it's just not going to be the same. Anyway, so I did used to look at conventions, and I think there is I think it's on YouTube somewhere, isn't there? He's singing it. And then Button Moon was a children's
I remember Button Moon.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there's not time for Peter to sing Button Moon today.
Yes, fortunately there's not time.
Not time, yes.
Speaking on the fact that your son-in-law is David Tennant,
Is he?
how confused do you think the fans get when you realise your daughter is the daughter of the Doctor, and you are the Doctor, and so is your son-in-law, and your son-in-law is married to your daughter?
Yes. Yes, there was a moment when I had to give the sort of the father of the bride speech at the wedding of my daughter to the aforementioned David Tennant, and I of course related the story about Georgia was in the episode called The Doctor's Daughter, and because she was the Doctor's daughter, and then she married the Doctor, even though she was the Doctor's daughter, which of course ended up with me effectively saying that she had married me. So I thought I'd better stop the story there. It seems sort of slightly inappropriate. So what can you say? It's a complicated thing. I have since come up with a story that it wasn't true. That when we did Time Crash, or they asked me to do Time Crash, I said to David, I'll only do it if you take my daughter off my hands. Which he then did very kindly, so that was all, but it's not true. It's confusing, isn't it? It must be terribly confusing to Georgia. Except, of course, we are, of course, entirely different people, and that's all sort of science fiction program. So it's very nice, and I think why they got together, I am pretty sure, in my own mind, is because David, as I said, was very successful, and I think it was probably fairly intimidating to women who he met, because he was the Doctor. And then he worked with my daughter, who was profoundly unimpressed by the fact he was the Doctor. Because she said, well, my dad's the Doctor, why do I care about that? So I think this have a kind of, maybe a challenge at David's head. I can't have this. And the rest is history.
Fabulous, great question. Okay, let's go here.
Of all the things that you've done, be it theatre, audio, or TV, which do you find the most challenging and rewarding?
Good question. I don't know. Challenging as you get older is theatre. Is your memory going to hold up? I enjoy whichever I'm doing. It's a strange thing. I did a stage play musical last summer. I've done another Gypsy in 2016. I don't do a lot of theatre, to be honest with you, because I think I probably enjoy the social aspect of television a bit more, because it's just day to day, especially if you're in something quite a lot. I tend to really love the thing I'm doing at the time I'm doing it. I know this is a bit of a pathetic answer, but when I was doing a stage show, I'm thinking, how could you do anything else? This is brilliant. You know, you have a great cast, you're coming in every night, you're trying something different, maybe very slightly, trying to keep the whole experience alive. It can be frustrating in the theatre because you can come in one night and you can do it and the audience loves it and you think, yes, this is how I should do it every night. And you go in the next night and you do it exactly the same way and the audience appears to hate it. And I can't explain why that is. You know, it's maybe it's the extra drink that the audience the first night had. But then when I do television, I think this is great too, because I'm just doing a different scene. When you finish it, you'll have a finished product. I can't really answer which I find more challenging. Except I think if I was to be offered a big acting part in a play, I would have to think long and hard about it if I wanted to do it, because there is quite a lot of stress involved in just remembering what the heck you're doing as the years go by.
Hurrah for Big Finish, where you just read it off the bat.
Yes, I suppose in a way, although I love doing them again. Big Finish is the least challenging, so I try to make it a bit more challenging by never reading the script. And I get given a hard time by this by certain members of the cast.
Yes.
Because she's always complaining, he hasn't even read the script. But there's something about getting that script and you read it through months as kind of rehearsal, and then you're sort of walking on a tightrope, and it's brilliant. It kind of brings it alive. And sometimes if you rehearse those things, if you even go through it once at home and think, I'll play this like this, it takes away the spontaneity of that, because there isn't much spontaneity, because you are reading the script off a piece of paper. So I suppose I endeavour to make it challenging by not working very hard.
Okay, you have
How much input did you have into the costume? How did you feel about the costume? And why the vegetable? Why the celery? Did you choose that?
I did not choose it. No, it's not my fault. Okay, so my input, as I remember, is that John Nathan Turner said to me, we need something sort of British but eccentric. And I said cricket. Why not? Because I love cricket and it is sort of a bit eccentric. And British. So he seems to think that he suggested it, but I don't believe that to be true. And you can't argue with that now, sadly.
I thought, wasn't there a picture of you in a cricket jumper that he saw?
Yes.
He thought it was a good look.
Yeah, there was a picture. Yeah, when we were doing All Creatures Great, he was on a show called, I think it was called Flesh and Blood, and we had a cricket match between that cast and the All Creatures.
Because he worked on All Creatures.
He worked on All Creatures, yeah. So I think he saw that and thought, but I said no, I'm having a conversation with him about cricket.
Yeah.
About how I think it should be something to do with cricket. So who knows? I can't remember that well now. But apart from that, I had no input at all. They took that idea away, and then they came back with my costume, which I was perfectly happy with. Really, didn't really resemble a Victorian cricket outfit at all that I've ever seen, but it had a nice feel to it.
But on location, at least it was warm, unlike your companions.
Well, yeah, What, you mean skimpy outfits?
Yes.
Well, no, in the first series they were covered from head to foot.
Yes.
You know, Janet had an air stewardess's outfit on, and Sarah had this big velvety thing on. So I think they were pretty warm in the first series. They did insist on walking in high heels, even when they were climbing mountains, which I couldn't quite understand. But then at the end of the first series, and I believe this is true, somebody wrote to John Nathan Turner and said, why are the companions covered up from head to foot? Because you had, Leah walking around in a fur bikini, as historically. And so suddenly overnight, John and the designer came up with just about the skimpiest outfits you could possibly imagine. You know, Janet was in some sort of boob tube and Sarah was in her underwear, as far as I could tell. And that was because, John was afraid that, the men might not turn on the television if they were too clothed. Sign of the times. But the celery, John Nathan Turner came to me one day before we started filming and said, I've got a great idea for what you should wear on your lapel. I said, what? He said, a stick of celery. And I said, okay, why? And he said, I've no idea. So I said, well, as long as you explain it before I leave, that's fine with me. So
And I think they did right at the very last moment.
I had to remind them, because they hadn't done it.
There's one more thing. Yeah. Exactly. Okay, another question. In a Sylvester McCoy jumper, not a Peter Davison jumper, but I'm just saying.
I'm sort of wanting to know if there was a monster that you wish you had fought, but didn't on Doctor Who.
I don't know if there was. I mean, I do like some of the more recent. So I like The Silence and things like that. But I'm not sure how you fight them. I mean, the Daleks and the Cybermen, you sort of have to fight, which is, it seemed right to me. Sorry, I'm choking. Yeah, so I don't know about that. I'm not sure. And also, I'm not that acquainted with all of the previous monsters that were around and not brought back in my time. So I don't know. It's not a very good answer, is it?
That's all right.
Yeah, the modern I do think the modern monsters, especially the ones created by the evil genius mind of Stephen Moffat, are quite creepy and kind of gripping in themselves. I'm just not sure how they fit into a kind of action-packed Doctor, in terms of me running up and down corridors.
Okay. I think we've got time for one more question, one final question. Yes, your hand went up here. Let's go around back of the room.
More recently, the characters that you've been playing have not been quite so nice, some quite unpleasant ones. Would you like to be a villain in Doctor Who?
Yeah, that's really mean. A villain in Doctor Who? I don't know. Villains are kind of better to play than, I suppose, ordinary, just nice character in Doctor Who that gets knocked off in the, halfway through episode 1. So maybe, yeah. But I don't want it to take away. I kind of like the Fifth Doctor character, really. Now I've got quite used to it. I'm not sure if I want to diminish it by playing an evil character in Doctor Who.
Well,
Better just make me the Doctor again. It's the easiest thing.
Well, you played Omega as well, didn't you?
I did. Well, Omega turned into me, strictly speaking, in the story. But I got to play effectively Omega, me, the actor. Yeah, so you're right. I like going away and playing very nasty characters for a while, but I think I'm then become much more comfortable when I come back to a nice character.
Actually, actors who play nasty characters get heckled in the street, don't they?
They can get beaten up in the street. Yes, I knew one actor who got I think he was responsible for a break-in on Coronation Street and beating up the man who used to run the shop.
And someone did a citizen's arrest or something?
No, someone beat him up in the pub the night after it went out.
Oh dear.
Because they thought they found the person, you know, and they had, who robbed the store. The only problem was it was fiction. It was Coronation Street. And he wasn't very happy. He's a very nice chap, just got beaten up in the pub.
So perhaps being the Doctor is a better outcome. We have run out of time, folks. Please give a huge round of applause to the brilliant Peter Davison.
Thank you very much. Thank you.